So I want to talk a bit about the group Women Against Feminism. I already made a video about this, but this is more to do with the backlash against it. And they put an interesting link from the Boston Globe, which seems to me to be a very fair article. It mentions both sides, but I'm going to read that article. Bear with me, it is a little bit on the long side, but I don't want to edit it because I think it's worth reading out, so please just bear with me whilst I read this out. Shouldn't take longer than 5 minutes. This is from the Boston Globe, dated September 2nd, 2014, by Kathy Young. Women Against Feminism. Some women want equality without anger. And this is what it says. Do American women still need feminism? A controversial social media movement called Women Against Feminism features women explaining, mostly in selfies with handwritten signs, why they do not. Feminist responses have ranged from bafflement to vitriol or mockery to arguments that these women don't know what feminism is. But while this new movement has its silly aspects, it raises some much needed questions about feminism's present and future state, and in the weeks since it first attracted notice, many prominent feminists have helped validate some of the criticisms. One might assume that Women Against Feminism is a traditionalist backlash against gender equality, yet many of the women say they reject feminism precisely because they are pro-equality. A blogger who goes by AstroKidNJ has analysed a week's worth of posts on Women Against Feminism and found that 46% were egalitarian, 19% endorsed men's issues, and 12% criticised feminist intolerance towards dissent. Only 23% reflected traditionalist views such as support for distinct sex roles, chivalry, or full-time motherhood. Some commentators suggest that pro-equality women who reject feminism are misguided. After all, the dictionary defined feminism as belief in the social, economic, and political equality of the sexes, but these women usually know that, and often sarcastically stress they do. They simply think that real-life feminism has come to mean something else: vilification of men, support for female privilege, and a demeaning view of women as victims rather than free agents. Are they wrong? Well, one of Women Against Feminism's harshest critics, leading feminist pundit Jessica Valenti, makes it clear that being a feminist means believing that women in America and other modern liberal democracies are a victimized class. They are systematically discriminated against in school, in work and politics, objectified and harassed, attacked and sexually assaulted. This, Valenti asserts, is not a matter of politics but of truth. But contributors to Women Against Feminism disagree. They note that many studies show the pay gap to be largely due to women's choices of more family-friendly and life-friendly jobs. As for school, American women have long outpaced men in educational attainment, currently earning about 60% of college degrees. Just get a little breath. They take issue with rape statistics that lump alcohol-fueled, judgment-impaired sex with sexual assault. They argue that men face their own negative stereotypes. They point out that men are at higher risk than women for most violent crimes and may be far more likely than previously thought to experience domestic violence and sexual coercion. They say that in many areas, from divorce to mental health to workplace safety, it's men who have it worse. These arguments need to be engaged, not dismissed and ridiculed. Yet many feminists have responded with nastiness that would normally be called misogynist. And the New York Observer, Nina Burley, focused on a few photographs showing too much skin or black polished nails to sneer that the women were dressed and posed like ads for DIY escort services. Meanwhile, even as feminists deplore accusations of male bashing, many are embracing ironic misandry. Valenti recently tweeted a picture of herself in a t-shirt declaring, "I bathe in male tears." Other examples include the mottos "Ban Men" and "Kill All Men," and internet jokes that turn book titles into castration one-liners. Feminist commentators such as Slate.com's Amanda Hess defend this practice as a cool in-joke that annoys the sexists and mocks the idea that women are anti-male. But aside from the fact that cliquish in-jokes are off-putting and ironic, hate can still sound pretty hateful. The misandry joke falls flat because there are too many real-life examples of feminist anti-male bias. The National Organization for Women has fought against more rights for divorced fathers, often suggesting that men who advocate for such rights are abusers. Feminist groups urging stronger enforcement of domestic violence laws have cried foul when such tough policies have led to more arrests of women. Anti-rape activists have championed campus rules that brand the man an attacker and the woman a victim if they have had sex while being equally intoxicated. Women Against Feminism is largely a reaction against this mindset. The anti-feminist egalitarians believe that whatever feminism's positive past gains, its dominant modern version is hostile to men and demeaning to women. They are right. I don't like the anti-feminism label because of its common meaning of anti-woman or anti-equality, but call it reform feminism or egalitarianism. We need a movement for true equality, against both old-fashioned sexism and new gender polarization. And that is by Kathy Young, who's a columnist at Newsday and RealClearPolitics.com. I'll put a link to that article. It's from the Boston Globe. I think that's a very good article, and I think she really hits the nail on the head. My own position is very similar to hers, in that I do believe in equality, but I believe basically the feminist movement is hypocritical, is polarizing, and certainly in its American context actually has a very nasty streak. The group Women Against Feminism on Facebook has about 25,500 supporters. There is a rival group, People Against Women Against Feminism, which only has 200 supporters. I should say some of those on Women Against Feminism are people who disagree. I won't use on trolls, bearing in mind my last video. I won't say the word trolls, but they're feminists who have come onto the group obviously to disagree. Mostly they do it in a reasonable way, but there's a few problems that moderate feminists, I take issue with moderate feminists, and by that I mean those feminists who are not exactly like Jessica Valenti. She sounds like a very unpleasant individual. I don't know much about her, but given her stance and given the way she's described there, she sounds pretty much like some of the Lee's following feminists. And the things I'm about to quote I've probably quoted before, but I think it's very important to emphasize this, because it really strikes at the core of why feminism is a deeply, deeply unpleasant movement in its modern context. Here's some quotes from famous feminists. I feel that man-hating is an honourable and viable political act, that the oppressed have a right to class hatred against the class that is oppressing them. Robin Morgan. To call a man an animal is to flatter him. He is a machine, a walking dildo. Valerie Solanas. I want to see a man beaten to a bloody pulp, with a high heel shoved in his mouth like an apple in the mouth of a pig. Andrea Dworkin. Rape is nothing more or less than a conscious process of intimidation by which all men keep all women in a state of fear. Susan Brown Miller. The more famous and powerful I get, the more power I have to hurt men. Sharon Stone. In a patriarchal society, all heterosexual intercourse is rape, because women as a group are not strong enough to give meaningful consent. Catherine McKinnon. The proportion of men must be reduced to and maintain at approximately 10% of the human race. Sally Miller Gearhart. Men who are unjustly accused of rape can sometimes gain from the experience. Catherine Commons. All men are rapists and that's all they are. Marilyn French. Probably the only place where a man can really feel secure is in a maximum security prison, except for the imminent threat of release. Germaine Greer. Now, I'm well aware that many feminists will say, oh, we don't agree with those sentiments. We don't hate men. We have brothers, we have fathers, we have sons, we have husbands. And I don't believe that all feminists hate men. I've said that time and time again. I don't believe all feminists hate men. I personally count feminists who are polite and who come across as quite reasonable. But it's also indisputable that they haven't done anywhere near enough to combat the extremists within their movement. And when a movement allows itself to be either hijacked, or let's say when they allow their extremist elements to have free rein without any sort of opposition, then the movement will get tired with that. So feminists might complain that they get a bad image, but it's their own fault if they don't do anything to combat the misandry that is within the movement. And it is absolutely ridiculous, because I believe that there are feminists out there who are decent people and who don't hate men and who genuinely believe in egalitarian principles, but the fact remains that they have not done nearly enough to oppose these extremists. Now let's look at some of those names. Germaine Greer, Sharon Stone. They're hardly fringe figures. You know, we're not talking about women who had one little article in one small publication 30 years ago. A lot of these women have very prominent places in the feminist movement, and moderate feminists have done nothing to condemn them. I am yet to see a moderate feminist turn around and say, look, your attitude is wrong. We're campaigning for equality, we don't hate men. Your attitude is wrong, get out of our movement. I am yet to see a moderate feminist do that, and until they do, then the movement speaks for itself. It is indisputable that feminism as a movement is very intolerant of dissent, and that woman Jessica Valenti, her attitude just seems to demonstrate that. Feminism is demeaning to women in the sense it forces women to conform. If women don't conform, then they're branded either subservient or stupid. And if men question feminism in any way, and this is why Women for Feminism is so important, because it is a lot harder for men to do it. If men question feminism in any way, we're automatically branded misogynists who want to control women. The narrowness of feminist thinking is one of its biggest flaws. Whilst historically feminism has had many important goals and has had achievements that need to be recognised, the idea that feminism is above critique is utterly rubbish. I do hope we get into a situation where misandry will become more of a household name in the next few years, because it unquestionably exists within the modern feminist movement. That's not the same as saying all feminists hate men, because they don't. But unquestionably, feminists do not do nearly enough to combat the problems within the movement. Now, when you have people like Emma Watson basically complaining about feminism having a bad image, my response is, well, what are you doing as a feminist? And I'm not focusing just on her. I'm talking about feminists who complain that, oh, it's not about man-hating. Okay, well, what are you doing to actually counter that view? You personally, what are you doing to counter the view that feminism is anything other than the negative stereotypes it gets? Feminism is polarizing. It does slander men, and it does constantly. I mean, that comes from the horse's mouth. Jessica Valenti, that little rant she came out with, if that quotation in the Boston Globe is correct, basically just demonstrates everything that is wrong with feminist thinking. We are victims, men are oppressors. Put it this way, if it was a white supremacist group blaming minorities for all of the perceived problems that they face, there would be a massive outcry. So why is it feminism is given free rein to do what it wants? I mean, I think we are going to see a positive trend whereby there's going to be an increasing number of women speaking out, and feminists are going to realise that they're either going to have to moderate, rein in on the extremists, change the name of the movement, or it's going to lose support, because actually I do believe that feminism is given disproportionate influence in the media, way too disproportionate. Most women and most men do not support it. So why does it get so much airtime in the BBC, in CNN, in Time magazine? Why does feminism get so much coverage? To me, that doesn't seem proportionate to the support that it gets. So far from being underdogs, the feminist movement is actually incredibly powerful and incredibly influential in modern Western societies. And as a result of that, all critics are basically silenced and bullied into submission. And I'm so sick of it. I'm willing to engage in debate with feminists, and I have a few times. If they're going to be respectful to myself, I'll be respectful back. But I would ask them to take on board these issues. And if you're a feminist and you're sitting there saying, oh, but this is unfair, the movement is not like this. Okay, well then you prove that by condemning those feminists who are trying to silence men's rights issues, by doing something about men's rights as well. I'm not saying don't do things about women's issues, I'm just saying prove that you're a true egalitarian, and also acknowledge men's issues. Because that 15-minute speech that Emma Watson made is not going to change decades of negative feminist activity. It's not. And to me it's just symbolic really that feminists are starting to realise that actually there is a backlash against the movement. Women Against Feminism is a very important group. These are not sort of Christian right women. They're women from a wide range of backgrounds. So I think it's a very important group. It's refreshing. Um, I just think that the feminist movement, its arrogance has basically caused its problems.